All right, so are you ready to go deep?
Always ready for a deep dive.
Okay, perfect, cause today we're going deep into the world of HPV research.
That's fascinating.
It is. It really is. And you might be thinking, HPV? That's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah,
But trust me, there's a lot more to uncover than you might think.
I believe it.
Yeah, so we are diving into a 2022 study that analyzed the 100 most cited HPV papers of all time.
Okay, yeah, and that's key, right? Focusing on the most cited papers.
Yeah. Why is that so important?
Well, these are often the studies that have really shaped the field, the groundbreaking discoveries, the influential ideas.
The ones that everyone's like, oh yeah, I know that paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, so think of it like we're getting like a cheat sheet
Right.
to understanding what the scientific community considers the most important things about HPV.
I like that.
Right.
Nice. Cheat sheet.
Cheat sheet. We're getting decades of research distilled down to the essentials.
That's the dream.
All in one episode, and who knows, we might even uncover some unexpected insights along the way.
All right, I'm excited.
Are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, so first things first.
Yeah.
A real quick refresher just on the basics.
Okay.
We all know HPV is the main cause of cervical cancer.
Yeah.
But did you know there are actually over 200 different types of HPV?
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
Right, each with its own unique characteristics.
Right.
And only a small handful, like about 12, are considered high risk for causing cancer. We've made some progress with vaccines, but HPV is still a global health challenge.
Absolutely.
And, there's some big questions about things like persistent infections that are still lingering.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why research like this is so important.
Yeah.
It helps us move beyond just the basics and really understand how HPV works, how it spreads, and how we can protect ourselves better.
As I was digging into this study, I was struck by something really interesting.
Okay.
There was this huge explosion in the number of HPV publications after 2002, peaking in 2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm curious, what do you make of that timing?
Well, that timing is really no coincidence.
Yeah.
Think back to 2006. That's when the first HPV vaccine was approved.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense that a groundbreaking prevention strategy like that would spark a surge in research.
Like everybody's like, okay, let's figure this out now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Scientists wanted to investigate everything about the vaccine, its effectiveness, safety, long-term impacts, you name it.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect.
Well,
One major breakthrough leads to this wave of new research.
totally.
Oh, and speaking of breakthroughs, the study also found that the annual citation count for these HPV papers actually peaked in 2010.
Interesting.
And guess what else happened that year?
What?
Harold Zerhausen, the scientist who first linked HPV to cervical cancer,
Right.
won the Nobel Prize.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing how those events are intertwined.
right.
It seems like major scientific recognition can really shine a spotlight on a particular field
Yeah.
and drive even more research interest.
Okay, so we know when all this research was happening, but where was it being published? The study actually looked at that too, and here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
While some of these highly cited papers come from big-name journals, like the New England Journal of Medicine, a lot of them are from lesser-known publications.
Interesting.
So I have to ask, does this mean that the fame of a journal doesn't really matter?
That's a great question. And while journal impact factor can be an indicator of overall quality,
Yeah.
the number of times a specific paper is cited is a more direct measure of that paper's influence.
So it's like saying don't judge a book by its cover.
Right, exactly.
A groundbreaking study can come from anywhere.
Absolutely.
And I think that's encouraging
Yeah.
for researchers working outside those top-tier institutions.
Yeah, it really levels the playing field in a way.
Yeah.
And it reinforces the idea that we should always evaluate research on its own merits, regardless of where it's published.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about how the focus of HPV research has evolved over time.
Yeah.
The study authors actually used keywords to track these shifts.
Interesting.
And it really paints a picture of how our understanding of HPV has grown.
Yeah.
In the early days, the research was all about identifying HPV and mapping its DNA.
Makes sense.
It was like a detective story, right?
Yeah.
Trying to unlock the secrets of this virus.
You have to understand the basics before you can really start tackling the bigger questions.
Right. Imagine trying to develop a vaccine without even knowing the genetic makeup of the virus.
Exactly.
So as our knowledge grew, the research focus broadened.
Yeah.
Scientists began to investigate the epidemiology of HPV,
Yeah.
studying how common it is in different populations and what risk factors might make someone more vulnerable to infection.
And I think that shift was really important.
Yeah.
Because it helped us understand that HPV isn't just an individual problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a public health issue that requires a population-level approach.
And then, more recently, we've seen an explosion of research on vaccines and screening methods.
Makes sense.
It's almost like the field has moved from simply understanding HPV
Right.
to actively trying to prevent and manage its impact.
That's a great observation. Yeah. It's about translating knowledge into action.
Mm-hmm.
And this shift is really evident in the research landscape.
Okay. And speaking of shifts, there's another interesting one the study uncovered.
Okay.
Initially, the vast majority of HPV research focused on women and cervical cancer.
Yeah.
Makes sense, given that's the most common cancer caused by HPV.
Yeah.
But in recent years, there's been a growing interest in looking at HPV in men.
Yeah. That's a critically important development.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights a couple of things.
Okay.
First, it recognizes that HPV isn't just a women's health issue.
Yeah.
Men can get HPV too.
Right.
And they can also develop HPV-related cancers.
Yeah.
Though they are less common than cervical cancer.
Right.
Second, it emphasizes the need for a more inclusive and comprehensive approach to HPV prevention and treatment.
This makes me think back to that point about the 2006 vaccine approval.
Yeah.
Do you think that had an influence on the shift towards a more gender-neutral approach?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think the vaccine played a role in raising awareness about HPV in general and the fact that it can affect everyone, regardless of gender.
Okay, so remember those two highly cited 1990 papers we mentioned earlier?
Yes.
The ones published in Cell and Science.
Oh, yeah. Huge journals.
They were pretty groundbreaking because they revealed how a specific protein in HPV, called E6, interferes with the crucial gene in our cells called P53.
Right.
Now, this might sound a little complicated,
Right.
but stick with me because it's a really important concept.
Right. Think of P53 like a security guard in your cells,
Okay.
preventing them from growing out of control.
Got it.
And E6 is like a sneaky thief who disarms the alarm system,
Oh.
allowing cancer to develop.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so these studies were huge because they pinpointed a specific mechanism by which HPV could actually drive cancer development.
And they also discovered that the E6 protein from high-risk HPV types
Right.
was particularly good at messing with P53 compared to the low-risk types.
Interesting.
Yeah, this helped explain why some types of HPV are more likely to cause cancer than others.
Yeah.
These studies were published over 30 years ago,
Wow.
but they're still cited all the time
I believe it.
because they laid such important groundwork.
They really opened up a whole new avenue of research
Yeah.
into the molecular mechanisms of HPV-driven cancers.
Right, and the insights from those studies are still relevant today
Absolutely.
as we continue to develop new strategies to target those mechanisms.
Okay, so speaking of new strategies,
Yeah.
it's no surprise that research on HPV vaccines has exploded in recent years,
Yeah.
especially after 2002,
Right.
which aligns perfectly with that surge in publications we talked about earlier.
Like, boom. So what were some of the key areas that this vaccine research focused on?
Well, one major focus was on establishing efficacy.
Okay.
Essentially, how well the vaccines actually work in preventing HPV infection and the diseases it can cause.
Right. We need to know if these vaccines are actually doing their job.
Exactly.
So was there anything beyond just efficacy that they were focusing on?
Absolutely. Researchers also investigated the different types of HPV that vaccines target.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, there are over 200 types of HPV,
Yeah.
but only a handful are linked to cancer.
Right.
So one challenge was to develop vaccines that provided protection against the most dangerous types. And we saw progression from the first generation of vaccines,
Okay.
which targeted 2 types, to newer vaccines that protect against 4
Wow.
or even 9 types of HPV.
So it's like a constant arms race,
It is.
trying to stay ahead of the virus.
Exactly.
And what about expanding the vaccination recommendations to include boys and men?
Yes, absolutely.
What?
As we were talking about earlier, there's been a growing recognition that HPV isn't just a women's health issue.
Right.
Men can get HPV too,
Yeah.
and they can pass it on to their partners.
Right.
So vaccinating boys and men became a key focus, both to protect them from HPV-related cancers
Right.
and to reduce the overall spread of the virus.
It's fascinating how the evolution of research mirrors the evolution of public health thinking.
It is, absolutely.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of this deep dive. It shows how research can really drive changes in how we approach health and disease prevention.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
From the basics of HPV to the major shifts in research focus over time.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't end there. The study authors actually took things a step further and looked specifically at the research trends in papers published after 2013.
Interesting.
Just to get a sense of the latest hotspots in HPV research.
Like peeking into the future of the field.
Exactly.
I like it.
So what did those more recent papers reveal? Were there any big surprises?
Well, some themes definitely carried over from the earlier research.
Yeah.
For example, the epidemiology of HPV and cervical cancer are still major areas of focus.
Okay.
But there were also some really intriguing shifts.
Like what?
One thing that stood out was the growing emphasis on HPV's connection to other types of cancer,
Okay.
particularly head and neck cancers.
That makes a lot of sense, especially considering what we were discussing earlier
Well,
about the move towards a more inclusive view of HPV.
exact.
It's not just about cervical cancer anymore.
It's not, and the research itself is becoming more sophisticated as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot interested in the specific mechanisms of how HPV causes cancer,
Okay.
the role of the immune system in fighting off the virus, and potential new treatment approaches, including immunotherapy,
Immunotherapy, so that's...
which harnesses the power of the immune system
Okay.
to target and destroy cancer cells.
Wow. Immunotherapy for HPV-related cancers. That sounds incredibly promising.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks to how much progress has been made in understanding the complexities of HPV and how it interacts with our bodies.
Okay, so on the one hand, it's amazing to see all this progress
Yeah.
and these potential breakthroughs on the horizon.
Right.
But on the other hand, it makes me wonder if it's becoming harder and harder to keep up with all the research.
Yeah.
I mean, remember that stat from the beginning about nearly 50,000 papers on HPV?
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot to sift through.
That's a great point. Even for those of us who work in the field, it can feel overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
But that's where something like this deep dive becomes so valuable.
Right.
We're doing the heavy lifting for you,
Yeah.
highlighting the most influential research and distilling the key takeaways.
It's like having a cheat sheet
Right.
to the world of HPV research.
Exactly.
But beyond just summarizing the findings, I think this type of analysis also helps us understand the historical context.
Yep.
Sometimes revisiting those foundational studies can spark new questions
Absolutely.
or even lead to new discoveries down the line.
It's not just about knowing the latest findings.
Right.
It's about understanding how we got here. Those early discoveries, like the ones we discussed about the E6 protein, laid the groundwork for so much of the research that followed.
It's all connected.
It is.
It's like a scientific family tree with each new discovery branching out from those that came before.
I like that analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the key takeaway here is that it's important to strike a balance between staying on top of the latest trends
Yeah.
and appreciating the contributions of those earlier discussions.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole picture
Yeah.
and understanding how the pieces fit together.
Now, all this talk about research trends and scientific breakthroughs is fascinating.
Yeah.
But let's bring things back down to earth for a moment.
Okay.
Why should you, the listener, care about all of this? How does this knowledge translate into real-world impact?
That's the most important question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ultimately, this knowledge is about empowering you to take charge of your own health.
I love that.
Yeah.
Taking ownership of your health journey.
Precisely. By understanding these research trends,
Yeah.
you can have more informed conversations with your doctor,
Yep.
stay up to date on the latest prevention and treatment options, and make more informed decisions about your well-being.
It's about becoming a health advocate for yourself.
Exactly.
So it's not about becoming an HPV expert overnight.
Right.
It's about having enough knowledge to be proactive and ask the right questions.
Exactly. And you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
There are so many resources available to help you navigate the world of HPV and make informed decisions about your health.
You know, as we're talking about this, I can't help but think back to when I first learned about HPV.
Yeah.
I remember feeling a little overwhelmed and a bit confused. There was so much information out there.
Right. And it wasn't always easy to separate fact from fiction.
I think that's a common experience.
Yeah.
HPV is a topic that can sometimes feel shrouded in mystery and even stigma.
That's true. But I think open and honest conversations like this one can help dispel some of those myths
Absolutely.
and empower people to take control of their health.
I completely agree. Knowledge is power. And when it comes to HPV, that knowledge can quite literally save lives.
Okay, so before we move on to the final section of this deep dive, I have to ask, what were some of the most surprising or interesting things you personally learned?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
There were so many aha moments for me.
Okay.
I think what struck me the most was the sheer breadth and depth of the research being conducted around the world.
Yeah.
It's truly a global effort.
It is.
With scientists from all different backgrounds and disciplines coming together to tackle this complex challenge.
I agree, and it's inspiring to see how much progress has been made in just a few decades.
It really is. I mean, think about it. We've gone from barely understanding HPV to having effective vaccines and exploring cutting-edge treatments like immunotherapy.
It's incredible.
It really is remarkable, and it makes you wonder what the next few decades will hold.
Right. What new discoveries will be made.
Right. What new challenges will we face?
It's a never-ending journey of discovery.
That's the beauty of science.
It is.
And with each new discovery, we gain a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
I love that.
But before we get too philosophical here,
Okay.
let's bring things back to HPV.
Right.
And focus on what the future might hold for prevention and treatment strategies.
Okay.
With all the ongoing research into HPV and its links to other cancers, where do you see things heading?
Well, I think we're gonna see a move towards more personalized approaches to HPV prevention and treatment.
Personalized approaches. What do you mean by that?
So think about it this way. Right now, we have a fairly one-size-fits-all approach to HPV vaccination. You know, we recommend it for everyone within a certain age range.
Right.
But as we learn more about the different types of HPV and the individual factors that influence risk, we might be able to tailor our prevention strategies more effectively.
So instead of just saying everyone should get vaccinated, we might start saying people with these specific risk factors should prioritize vaccination.
Exactly.
Or this particular vaccine might be more effective for people with this genotype.
Exactly. And that level of personalization could extend to treatment as well.
Oh, okay.
Imagine being able to predict which individuals are most likely to develop persistent HPV infections or progress to cancer.
Okay.
And then tailoring their treatment plans accordingly.
That sounds like the future of medicine right there.
It is.
So much more precise and targeted.
And as research into the molecular mechanisms of HPV-driven cancers advances, we can expect to see even more targeted therapies emerge.
Okay.
Therapies that zero in on the specific pathways that HPV uses to disrupt normal cell growth.
So we've got personalized prevention, personalized treatment.
Yeah.
What about the vaccines themselves? Any exciting developments on the horizon there?
Definitely, researchers are hard at work developing next-generation vaccines.
Okay.
That could offer even broader protection against more HPV types.
Oh, wow.
They're also exploring new delivery methods, like oral or nasal vaccines, which could make vaccination even more accessible and convenient.
Imagine a world where we could pop an HPV vaccine like a vitamin.
Right.
Or get it as a nasal spray.
Exactly.
That would be a game changer.
It would, and it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Oh, really?
The research in this area is incredibly promising.
So let's recap here.
Yeah.
We've got personalized prevention, more targeted treatments, next-generation vaccines. It feels like we're on the cusp of a major breakthrough in the fight against HPV.
I agree. The sheer volume and diversity of HPV research are encouraging. It demonstrates a real commitment to tackling this global health challenge head-on.
And it gives us hope.
It does.
Hope for a future where HPV-related cancers are a thing of the past.
That's a future worth striving for.
Well, there you have it, folks. Your deep dive into the world of HPV research.
Thanks for tuning in.
We've journeyed through decades of scientific discovery, uncovered groundbreaking findings, and explored the exciting possibilities that lie ahead.
It's been a journey.
It has. I hope you're leaving this episode feeling informed, empowered, and maybe even a little bit inspired.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about HPV, the better equipped you are to protect your health and the health of those you care about.
So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Until next time.